So that's why we would like to really open our track now, Sustainable Infrastructure and Rebuild, with really inspiring talks. And I really would like to thank them for traveling from really around the world to come and support us here in our WiDS event. And we want to start with the first speaker in this track. We're being very green, so that's why we are simply using the app to read and stay put for the day. So we'll start with Oumaima Talouka. She's an AI strategist. She's a professional coach and global speaker who bridges AI with human leadership and responsible innovation. Having built her career over 3 continents, Oumaima brings a very global perspective to technology adoption in diverse contexts. She's a former software engineer. She's a product and responsible AI lead at Microsoft, Air France, and Siemens. And now she coaches Fortune 500 leaders and startup founders worldwide in the very difficult task of harnessing AI responsibly and building resilient organization while strengthening the irreplaceable human capabilities. So through her talk today and the human and technology newsletter that she championed, she equips leaders to navigate the AI era with a guiding principle. I like it a lot. AI, what you can, human, what you must. So that's really nice. So help me welcome Oumaima to stage.
Thank you all for being here. I want to start by what an honor to be in Lebanon for my first time. An honor to be in such an amazingly exceptional conference for women in data science and AI, something that's very close to my heart. But before starting, I really want to thank the team who's behind this. Dr. Lama, Dr. Mariette, Hana, Layan, Hani, Ala, and all the people behind the scenes that really are making this journey so incredible. In Dr. Mariette's presentation, I really wanted to highlight my background. I'm from Morocco. I lived and worked across the 3 continents in different countries and different cities. And the reason why I mention this is because I had to adapt, develop, adopt, and also scale technologies across different contexts, cultures, and circumstances. And this is what I'm deeply, genuinely, I care about in my work. Because we can't just take a technology in one world and just assume that it's the lived experience of other people in a different world. It doesn't run equally. As a matter of fact, I'm currently the regional director of the AI Collective. It's a community of more than 100,000 members. We just crossed 100 chapters in the world, and I lead the MENA and the Francophone markets to expand AI communities across these regions. My goal is really to activate and empower people in our region with AI potential so that we can contribute to a higher growth, but also a economical prosperity. Now that we have at our fingertip a technology that can enable us in so many different ways, academically, from a business perspective, careers, creatively as well. So today I'll talk about responsible AI for sustainable infrastructure and how human judgment must prevail now more than ever. And this is where I'm going to put down some guiding principles. One of them is what was mentioned in the introduction, AI what you can, human what you must. And I want to start by a background of why I care about this. I'm an engineer. I was a software developer for many years. And what I understood to pivot to product management, strategy, and responsible AI, how we build a technology comes at the 4th place after why we build a technology, who are we building it for, and what are we building exactly. And the common denominator between answering these questions is the human. Is the human who make that decision, that align the team, that runs the business, that build the vision of a future that no technology can see. Think of all successful products that we see. It's a smart human thought leader that we all look up to who came up with that. It's not a technology. So, this is where I like to call the human in the question the power skills that are actually governing the technologies that we're driving with. And I hate to call them soft skills, just because it undermines the power of human leadership when we compare them with technical or hard skills. So this is why AI what you can and human what you must. And when I think about Lebanon rebuilding, we are at a crossroad. We either build faster with AI and deploy faster, or we actually put human at the center of this rebuilding. And this is essentially the foundation of the difference and the gap that is created when we go for a strategy to deploy everywhere, which is in hindsight the underlying principle for all technology corporations, or the technology that serves human, and this is where we talk about sustainable rebuilding. Another thing is rebuilding isn't just physical. When we think about infrastructure failures, they don't just cost money, they actually cost trust. And what do we say? When you lose trust, it's very difficult to rebuild it. That reputation is very important. And you can think about it at different levels of institutions, of relationships, of innovation. And that's why the rebuilding becomes fundamentally cognitive and cultural as well. So now that we have put down these guiding principles, I'm going to layer it up with reality checks. And this is no news to anyone. We're talking about energy shortages, water loss, and urban waste management and monitored. Now, I put 3 slides when I prepared these, but I actually want to add a 4th one that I talk about in presentation. But my experience yesterday made me realize that it's important to put it here, which is talent. It's my first time in Beirut. I was walking yesterday in Mar Mikhail, and I came across a postcard that said, Mabruk al graduation, when are you leaving Lebanon? So we all relate to that, okay? Like we come from Morocco, we come from different countries where we are getting higher and higher in expectations of our education, of our contributions to our communities and our families and what we build for ourselves and the purpose that we're after. But I never saw it black on white, and there was red on it as well, among other statement pieces. That was something like bonjour, bonjourin, or hi, kifek ça va. Like this was next to it. It was mind-blowing. It literally scarred me. And this is where Lebanon has to do more with less. When I turned to the person who was in charge of the store and I asked them, so I did the research and I looked into the data, dove into it, you know, to come here prepared and to also because of my position as the AI regional lead for this region. And she told me that a family member is actively trying to come back to Lebanon, dying to come back. But his expertise and talent does not find an opportunity here. His specialty does not have a job here in Lebanon. So they're trying to pivot to find a way to come back. And I am certain that all of us and all the people that we know, this year, these 2 years, more than ever, the diaspora is dying to contribute back to the region. So what does it mean to doing more with less? We have weak infrastructures, fragile governance, brain drain, data that's incomplete, which is perfect circumstances for a storm. But it's also perfect circumstances for responsible innovation. These are essentials to think by design about responsible innovation. Let's introduce AI to the chat. And I love to call it the double-edged promise. AI and data science for infrastructure is urgent, but when it does not have the right foundation, it becomes risky. And what it does is it can amplify the inequalities in the world. There is this interesting use case in India where a couple of years ago, they they deployed this technology for biometric authentication. Imagine with me an 82-year-old, an 88-year-old farmer actually walk into the facility to get their food and to get their pension. They come back with nothing. Why? Fingerprints. With aging, they fade. Manual labor, people that are heavy on manual labor, they also change. So a lot of conditions that actually don't take into consideration so many concepts and contexts in the technology that we're building. The AI can help in detecting leaks before they get to losses. It can optimize power grids. It can also monitor streets and traffic with sensors. But these are the inequalities that it actually can affect when the context is not taken into consideration, when the cultural realities and the human in the picture is not taken fully into consideration. So I want to root this talk in 3 main pillars. And before I go to that, obviously with what I just said, the question isn't whether AI works, we know that, but whether it actually works for everyone. So, the first pillar that I want to talk about, it's the context that matters. And that is rooted in 3 different components: the quality of the data, the cultural reality, and the institutional readiness. What that means is that AI must speak the language of its people. The data has to take into consideration the informal housing, the fragile governance, because the model will fail when it's actually meant to serve the very own communities it is destined for. And we've seen it, we have a lot of opportunities here in the MENA region where we can't deploy the Western LLMs in our region. We are having a lot of startups that are doing humongous work to develop LLMs that are specific to the region. It comes with the linguistics, but it also goes beyond that. The second pillar is the governance and human judgment. Technology is only neutral in theory. Governance is what actually gives it its direction, and human judgment is what actually gives it the ethics, defines the ethics for it. I have a pretty good example. When I was in Toronto, there was an experiment to deploy a pilot project for a smart urban area, and it was in one of the districts where I used to live. The technology itself was brilliant. It was meant for sidewalks detection, and the purpose of it was to enhance the livelihood of the residents, but also pilot future high-tech, high-design projects, urban projects. Super sophisticated. It failed miserably. In 2024, I think it was just called out. 2022, it was called out by Google. It was a startup that was acquired by Google. The reason for that is because socially it was rejected. Data privacy, data handling lacks transparency. And that is one of the fundamentals of responsible AI. In fact, when I was working at Microsoft for the responsible AI teams, when the EU Act came in, when the IDA, the Canada one, came in as well, we didn't have a standardized process. Every team is doing whatever they need to, but right now with the current context, we needed to build a platform, a standard experience for everyone to be onboarded. We had over 300 teams. All of them were at different phases, from ideation to production, etc., but we needed to make sure that they are compliant for every Microsoft service by a certain date. So we mobilized the team, and we went through building those workflows. We have assessments that every team would go through. Who do you think goes through the verification, the validation, and the completion of those assessments? Human. We were the one behind every assessment that a team will submit for an idea or for a project or for a model that they've been developing to question, is it doing the right thing? Is it biased? Is it fair? What is it exactly doing? And think about those questions in the back end. And this is where it becomes interesting because The human in the whole question isn't a brake, it's actually who is steering the wheels. And finally, the third pillar is the ecosystem and the capability building. We talk about infrastructure, but there are three other components that we mentioned briefly in the different aspects of this conversation that condition the infrastructure, but also are a result of a solid infrastructure: the talent, the trust, and the innovation. A system without the human that is maintaining it, that's operating it, that is governing it and monitoring it, is not a system that's going to be sustainable. And that means investing more in data literacy, local startups, and ethical leadership. And there is a pretty good startup ecosystem here in Lebanon. And what I would encourage is to actually tap into the potential of the diaspora. As I mentioned, this time is more than ever where the diaspora wants to chime in. And it doesn't mean that they have to be local. We are talking about a technology that's going to give us accessibility to so much advancement in the way we think about designing and solving solutions. It can start remote. They can actually participate in building that infrastructure. Once it starts flourishing, then you see people coming back and building opportunities. They don't need to wait for opportunities to come up. They come and start building them and actually contribute to the economical prosperity of the country and of the region. One of the interesting things that Morocco did a couple of weeks ago, they signed the deal with Mistral AI. It's one of the LLM developers in the EU. And this is what we talk about, the partnership between private and public to build the ecosystem. So they will be building locally the talent, the ecosystem, the governance. Because in Morocco, similar to here, data governance is at a different stage than the Western or Europe. But because of this partnership that they closed, we are going to be able to develop all these capabilities internally, work with our cultural reality, with our governance, with the expectation that we want from our communities. In summary,
This one?
yes. Thank you. All right, perfect timing for a summary of the framework that we've been discussing. So the responsible AI for sustainable infrastructure rests on these three pillars: understanding the context, embedding the human governance, and empowering the local ecosystem. And to give you a little practical question that you can just run away with as you're thinking about new system, designing them, having visions of what is possible now with this technology, I would encourage you, for context, to simply ask, whose reality does this data represent? For governance, who is accountable when AI decisions go wrong? The problem in the biometrical authentication deployment in India, in all the reports and the articles that were written about it, the number one question that people wanted answers to is accountability. They were not against the technology. They were against the accountability when the failures happen, when people did not get their pensions, when they didn't get their food, when there were death cases of people in villages who did not have access to those resources. And finally, capability to think around who benefits and who is left behind. And I'm not saying that a solution would answer all questions and be serving every community and every society, like any product. But as you're designing and thinking about those solutions, be mindful and put it forward. This is who is left behind because of this technology. These are some mitigation steps that we can already put in that are not going to be costly, but also these are the solutions that we can start thinking about as we deploy and learn from the deployment that we're putting forward. And this is my last call to action, which is to rebuild smarter. deploy what AI can, and lead with what human must. And measure what matters. We're very scientific when we think about measuring metrics from a technology perspective, product managers, scientific, data scientists, etc. But I would challenge you that the success in this equation is not just about the efficiency of a model, of the uptime. It's actually about the resilience, the trust, and the equity that at the end of the day gets measured and felt at a society level. So sustainability is not an algorithm outcome. It's actually a human choice. Every data set, model, and policy is an opportunity to build that trust. And in an age where AI, the algorithm IQ is not as important as the EQ of it, the cultural EQ of an algorithm. So it makes that an infrastructure that is not just built with bricks and bytes, it's also about people context and purposeful innovation. And finally, something that I've heard from so many of the people that I'm working with, whether professionals or organizations that are overwhelmed with the AI adoption. Is AI going to take our job? Is AI going to replace us? AI gives us precise vision, but only humanity gives it its purpose. AI will not replace the governance. It won't replace the human judgment. It actually elevates it. That was the end of my conversation. If you'd like more depth in it, if you'd like to talk about operationally how that is getting implemented, or dive deeper in each of the pillars that I talked about, please be in touch. I'm here around for the whole day. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everyone who's attending. It was a pleasure.
Hi, my name is David Mata. I'm the Career Management Services Director. I was really very inspired by your speech, by your presentation. And actually, it answers a little bit a burning question that I had from the ministerial panel about, what are the pillars? And you discussed it beautifully, that there's the context, there's the governance, and then there is the capability. And I was wondering about this thread that goes through the three, which you mentioned also as being trust. And for me, it's about an ethical dimension that usually is absent when we are developing or designing systems. Now, so the question is, how can we elevate, and you use this term that I liked also, the level of ethics to develop trust in all of these three, and in particular to the digital identity that we are now talking about. And some aspect that I did not hear until now is the citizen right to disclose information and to ask also for how this information is going to be used and when and how it's being used. Do you have any thoughts about that?
So is the question about how can we actually elevate the notion of ethics and trust and giving the power to the citizen?
In particular to the identity, the digital identity that is under formation and development, and whether it's going to be abused when there is an absence of democratic system. We have the examples of Estonia and of China on the other hand. So in Lebanon, how do we ensure that we are having a position regarding the surveillance and other things that go with this identity?
Of course. Transparency. Transparency is one. And the second one is literacy. Because you can have transparency, but if you don't have literacy for the people to know what's happening with their data, what's being used, what's behind the digital identity, this is the important one, the awareness, the literacy, the programs that are going to make every person who have a digital ID in their backpack, brain, whatever, in a system, they know what that entails. When they enter data in a computer or when they're given a form to enter data, they know where that goes. And this is the other part of transparency. And the transparency is going to be the government, the institution, responsibility to bring into the picture. And so without both, it just cannot work. And this is why I like to simplify these concepts, because technically they can become very, like a fairness of an algorithm. If you're not technical, it's very difficult to know how an algorithm in the back end is going to work. This is where the human in the picture that will simplify those concepts to explain, to ask the right questions and challenge the status quo come into the picture. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Yes.
Yes. I have a question. You mentioned about something about EQ. Emotional intelligence. I am a physician, a family physician. So empathy for me is one of the very essential pillars in my patient care, and is very important in medicine. How a model, an algorithm can mimic empathy? It's very far-fetched. It's very, for me, it's non-realistic.
Yeah.
Empathy is very human, especially when you have a patient, a sick person, a patient in pain, with mental illness, with people suffering. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest subjects when it comes to AI adoption and activation of AI in our societies. There has been a lot of use cases of people that were harmed because of the decisions that they run through when they talk to an AI. And in other words, there's also the benefits that an AI like coach or just support companion can bring. It's going to sound the same, but it's like a different phase of it, which is the literacy of using those models. When we activate AI and we raise awareness of AI in our communities, we can't just, yes, there are some people who will replace AI with Google with AI, and they're going to deeper, and they're going to see that, oh, I don't need to pay a therapist to handle my situation. Obviously, financially, it just makes sense. But we have to put those guardrails in the models. This is where the fine-tuning, the adapting the AI to the right industry, to the right vertical come into place. It can't be just used randomly. The guardrails, when a question like this sensitive comes in, this is where the model is trained to know, okay, this is sensitive, I can't be given advice. The redirection will be different. Because at the end of the day, the literacy comes in also the form of understanding a model is not a spirit. It's not a human. It's a bunch of data that is making some decisions to predict continuation of words that will make sense for you to understand. But if we're not understanding this, this is where we're going to lose the touch of the human aspect that cannot be replaced. Yes.
Thank you so much for a very lucid and inspiring talk. I have a twofold question here. One of them is how to engage the youth, which is really the vibrant partner in this enterprise in our societies, but making it not a dream going working. I'm going back to your notion, when are you leaving Lebanon? Not to go and pursue these dreams outside, but to make it relevant to the local landscape. So youth and the local landscape and retention is one. And I know it's a very tough question, but from your experience, how have you handled that situation? And the second question is, very often technology becomes so dazzling that people lose sight of humanity. People lose sight of the ethical considerations. And though, how do we keep the balance in the private sector, in digital, companies that are embracing this huge augmentation by AI, preserving the ethical consideration? And I know there are some regulations, but they're not very robust, and they're not widely monitored. So, ethics and youth.
Got it. Okay, I'll start with the youth one. I'm going to start with an example, a concept that's very relevant to the question. Organizations haven't changed their hierarchy and structure and how they operate in about 150 years. How can we expect innovation to come from such a constrained structure that won't allow the empowerment for that creativity to come in, for youth to want to test and try and fail and rebuild and have a bigger vision in a system that's fundamentally not designed for that? And rightfully so. It was designed for the era that it was designed for, and it worked. But we have to be aware that we're entering a new era. The way technology was built, the way solutions were thought, the way we've designed like society, problems and challenges, they're very different. Now technology is a huge part of our life. That has not been the case. Even though, yes, social media especially have taken such like a deep roots in how we function, but now with AI, it's completely changing the way we work and the way we live. And this is where AI-ready organizations become very important right now. This is essentially the work that I do with organizations and professionals, et cetera, to completely change the thought process around how you think about your future, how you think about an organization that's going to be empowering, not just for the business prosperity, but for the people inside of it, for them to bring that creativity and innovation. So, for the first question, I would say fundamental restructuring to give that opportunity for innovation to the youth. It's a different generation, it's a different world we live in. The second part, which is the ethics, of how do we keep the ethics at the center of the equation, and this is essentially where we don't wait to start building a system to then realize the bias and unfairness that it provides. We do have programs that are pretty good at literacy around what ethical development is. And we're building more that are more adapted to this era, to the organizations that we work in. It has to be by design. It has to be before we start ideating, and as we're thinking about what problem are we solving, where does the ethic come from it? It's very difficult because, again, we are in a completely reshifting of how we think about those solutions. But I feel like this is the biggest opportunity that we have, is to rethink not how social media came into the picture. I think a lot of us didn't have a choice of how it operates right now. But right now, we can reshape how things operate if we start thinking about them and put in the right basis and the right people and the right programs and the right upskilling in order to have those conversations early on. For them not to be, I don't understand what that means, I just want to make business, have the product work, and move on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.